My name is John Poggi. I entered a 2-year ROTC program. I went on active duty when I graduated in 1968.
My name is Jim Husing, U.S. Army. I had a 6-year obligation, so I served 2 years from July of 65 to July of 67 on active duty. 1 year of that, all of 66 in Vietnam. Then I had 4 years of inactive reserve.
My name is Dennis Whitaker, and I am going to be 79 in a couple of months. I served in the U.S. Army. I served almost a year in Vietnam in combat.
My name is Pete Morash. Technically it's Peter, but I go by Pete. I joined the United States Army in 1966 in February to beat the draft.
My name is Jack Wells. I was a second lieutenant. Promoted, commissioned as a second lieutenant.
Okay, I'm Bill Noyes, and my age now is 77 years old. When I was over in Vietnam, I was 20 and 21 years old.
My name is Lely Heslip, and I'm Vietnamese. I grew up in Vietnam through 2 wars.
Very hot place.
How hot it was.
123 degrees.
100 degree plus heat and humidity, no air conditioning.
That hot, that long, back in the United States. And especially if you're in a job that had you outside, camping out a lot, and carrying around a lot of weight on your back.
When you go out on patrol and you have lunch out in the jungle, you're carrying 90 or 80 or 70 pounds on your back, so it's heavy.
It was just, basically when you're in an infantry unit, an infantry combat unit, and you're in a war zone, you live like an animal, basically. We didn't have hot meals. The only time we got a shower is when we were back at our base camp. The only time we might get 1 or 2 hot meals while we were out in the field if they were close enough to helicopter them in. But most of the time we ate what were called sea rations. And the water, never had a cold drink of water while I was there. It was always, like drinking swimming pool water. And it was dirty and dusty where we were out in the jungle and the rice paddies, and it rained every day, it rained every night. We were wet most of the time. Early on, I didn't have any political views about it at all. And basically, when you're in a war zone and you're in constant combat like I was with others, your main focus is just to stay alive every day. I used to say a prayer every night. I used to say, God, give me one more day. That's all I'm asking, one more day. When a guy's shooting bullets at you and the bullets are whizzing by you, or mortar rounds are coming down on you, or you're going through the jungle and you see booby traps that are blowing guys' legs off, or bombs that are hanging up in the trees, and you come by and they set them off and it blows your head off. You don't have time to think about that. You're angry because a buddy of yours just got killed or severely wounded. I always looked at it, I'm doing my job. My country called me, I went. They asked me to do a job, I went. I didn't question the politics of it at that time.
It's really pretty primal. When you're up to your armpits in alligators, it's hard to remember the original objective was to drain the swamp. The soldiers and the people flying fighters and the people on ships aren't concerned. They don't have the time or the luxury to be concerned about global strategy and how we got here.
I never felt confused. I've heard a lot of GIs, why the hell are we here? This war is no good and this and that. I just tuned it out. I had a job to do. I did my job. I did the best job I could.
The short answer is no. Short answer is no. I kind of had an open mind, but I didn't think we were doing it well, and I wasn't completely convinced that American intervention in that foreign war was a good idea. The more I've read in my later years, the more I'm convinced that it was a mistake at a number of levels.
I didn't agree. I never actually agreed with it. Once I was in it, especially, I could see that it was just kind of a put together, fly-by-night plan. There was no real plan to win it, and what anyone was actually doing, fighting over there for, was hard to say.
People ask me, have you ever killed anybody? And I say, yeah, I have. But over there, it wasn't one-on-one. It was me and a bunch of guys and a bunch of enemy, and you're shooting at them. So you can say you killed somebody, but you don't know if it was your bullet or a combination of the bullets or whatever that killed them. So it made it less one-on-one, where it's going to affect you maybe more emotionally than if it's a group kill type thing. I remember one ambush patrol that we were on. We were just getting ready to go back to our battalion's perimeter, and it was early morning. It was about 6 in the morning. It was already daylight, and we were in a rubber plantation area. And the sergeant that was our leader that day said, "Jim, look out over there. I just saw movement by the trees." And it was about maybe 25 yards away, something like that, maybe a little closer even. It wasn't that far away. And so I looked out there, and it was kind of foggy a little bit, and I could see movement between the trees, black pajamas, okay, with straw hats. And they were coming towards us. And as they got closer, I could see they had weapons. They had rifles. It was VC, Viet Cong, and they were coming towards us. I had a machine gunner next to me with an M60 machine gun. He says, "Jim," he says, "what do you want me to do?" I said, "Open up, fire. Those guys are not friendlies." And so we fired at them. We opened fire on them, and a couple of them dropped. And then the sergeant said, "Let's pull back out of here because they're going to, I think they're going to be throwing hand grenades at us." And sure enough, so we backed up from our current position where we were, and sure enough, they started throwing hand grenades where we had been. So we just stayed where we were. We could have been injured or killed. So that's a true story. I don't dramatize anything I talk about. I just tell the truth. I don't need to dramatize anything because it's real. And I lived it, and I still feel it, 60 years later. And that's just how it is. There was another operation that we were on, and it was a huge battle that we were in. In fact, we killed about 350 enemy that day, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese. And at the end of the day, after the battle, we had to stay there that night to guard the perimeters. And it was one of the worst experiences I ever had because of the stench of dead bodies, 350 dead bodies with blown arms, blown heads off. I mean, it was gore beyond belief. I've got photos of some of them here that were taken. A buddy of mine took the photos. And war really is. War is hell. It's worse than hell. Living like an animal is hell. It's worse than hell. And I've experienced it. War is not fun. It's not glory. It's real, and people die, and dying is real. And if you've gone through that and survived it, you can appreciate it more, because there's 58,000 plus that didn't survive that war. And I always wondered, why did I survive and the guy on my right got killed and the guy on my left got killed? Why did Jim Husing survive? Never been able to answer that. But there is one answer. And I think I'm here to tell the story of what all of us went through. So I'm the one here to be the storyteller of what that war was like for them who can't tell the story because they're dead.
On one mission, we set out to go someplace and I heard voices, so I set up an ambush and in the middle of the night, you couldn't see what was going on. The next morning, I saw 4 bodies lying there in front of me that we had killed and probably 2 others that they dragged off. It turned out that where we set up the ambush was what was called Highway 1, the main highway between Hanoi and Saigon. The Russians used that for tanks, but it was a dirt road. We didn't know because by the time we got there, it was dark at night. So we had helicopters come and take the bodies away. All of us survived without a problem. And then 2 hours later, the company commander called me and said, "Lieutenant, you're 17 of you are in danger because there are 200 NVA coming after you because you killed some very important people. So meet up with another platoon." So the 3 platoons came together with the first platoon going on top of a ridgeline. So they could call in the naval artillery, the army artillery, the Air Force, all the power we needed. The other platoon and I circled the wagon. In the jungle, you very seldom dig in because the jungle hides you. It's the safest thing to do. Here we had to dig in because we had about 260 degrees of open field in front of us and the ridgeline behind us. So I was in charge because my rank was longer than the second lieutenant. Or not the second lieutenant, but the other first lieutenant who died. He was the one who died in that helicopter incident. And I went around for 3 hours making sure all my men dug down 2 to 3 feet because we were expecting RPGs or mortar attacks. And then as it started getting dark, I started digging my hole, which was not deep enough. And then when it got real dark, I stood up and said a prayer in front of all of us out loud. And it worked because the 200 NVA never showed up. All night long, we had luminous rounds going off with mortars to protect us so we could see them coming. My last order to everybody was fix bayonets. We were getting ready for them. And then I stood up and said the prayer.
Well, I was an infantry platoon leader. And I was only there for about 2 months. I was in about half a dozen firefights. And the first one and the last one are the most remembered. The first one, things were terribly messed up. I and a bunch of other people spent a lot of the fight in a bomb crater. A B-52 would run these, they're called arc light missions, and a 750-pound bomb hitting the ground in that part of Vietnam would leave a conical crater about 35 feet across and go over 15 feet deep, which would then fill up with water because of the water table. And 2 of our platoon, my platoon was the back platoon in reserve, and the 2 platoons that were supposed to start walking into the woods together hadn't tied in properly in the middle. And there were North Vietnamese there, and they opened fire, and we had 2 men down. And one of them was a radio operator who was broadcasting, I'm hit, they're all over the place. Come get me, I'm hit. Well, in that kind of radio network, if one person is holding the button down and talking, nobody else can talk. So the company commander was having trouble figuring out what was going on and getting other things to do. And we were essentially pinned down for a couple hours, really. But we weren't going to leave because we had 2 men down. And I tried looking over the top of this crater a couple times, and there were sticks and twigs and sand flying all over the place. One of our guys tried to come up over the top of the crater and was shot. And the fight ended after a couple hours when my unit was mechanized. We had armored personnel carriers, big 11-ton boxes on tracks. My track driver, 6-7 feet above those of us with our noses in the sand, thought he saw where the 2 wounded guys were. And he told his gunner to drop down into the track. He said, I'm going to drop the ramp, you get him. He charged forward into the brush with his armored personnel carrier, dropped the back ramp. The gunner looked down and grabbed the 2 guys by their harnesses, 2 wounded men, pulled them back, was able to back out. At that point, we could disengage. So we pulled back 150 yards, and there were fighters waiting to napalm the area. And so it was a complete mess up. And we went back in that afternoon. The napalmed area, all the foliage was burned off. Found the bunkers they were shooting at us from. And, one of the firing ports was 12 feet from the hole I was in. And there was one body we recovered and a couple of blood trails of enemy who'd been dragged away. That was a interesting introduction to combat in Vietnam.
Sure. So my 10th day after arriving in Vietnam, I was ordered to join another Marine unit in a battle. And the Marine unit was told to take control of the top of a 310-meter hill, and so it was Hill 310. We didn't realize there were communist soldiers on top waiting for us. All of us were heading up to the top of the hill. Within a matter of about 15 minutes, there were a dozen Marines killed and 30 wounded. We never got to the top of the hill. Finally, order being yelled out, retreat, for all the Marines to come off the hill. And then while I was laying on the hill, there was a Marine who had been killed, and another Marine brought his body down and put it next to me. And so here, laying 6 inches away from me, is a Marine who is dead. And in many movies, you'll see where someone passes away, you'll see a family member closing their eyes, shutting their eyes because their eyes were still open. He was laying, on his back, and I will forever remember the color of his eyes. His eyes were blue, and I was afraid to touch his face to close his eyes. And then
We had, like I said a long time ago, we had two bunkers at each end, and the POW camp was in the middle. And we had, in each bunker, they wanted to build the one bunker, the left one or whatever. So for every armed guard, we could send a deuce and a half around and sign out 4 prisoners of war. And we did that. And they drive around and they get out and they start filling sandbags. I was a welder, and I welded the 55-gallon drums together and all this. But it was sometime in the morning. I had come out, and I got actually a picture of this at home, and I was holding a welding whatever, and I had an armed guard, and 3 Vietnamese prisoners of war, 2 guys and the one in the middle. And they were walking straight at me. And I'm not thinking anything of it. I kind of stopped. Frank was with me. And he stopped about this distance away. And in his hand, he had on his side, he flipped it over like this. And with the pointed end actually towards him, towards me. And he goes, "Here." Now this guy, I found out later, was a lieutenant in the NVA. Could have put that right through me. And instead he gave it to me butt end first. That got my attention. He didn't do what probably anybody else would have done. Why, I don't know. And that was an experience. What they didn't know is these armed guards we had M14s with a magazine and no bullets in them because the captain wouldn't give them any bullets. That's a whole nother story.
I didn't understand at the time, but it was my platoon's turn to lead the company out on a mission. I was on the first helicopter with my ammo man, radio man, machine gunner, and the rest of my platoon was on the remaining 5 helicopters, and we lifted off the ground, came right back down. I thought one of the helicopters had a mechanical problem, and it turned out the company commander came over, took me off the helicopter, so my men got off the helicopter. The head of the 2nd platoon, I was the head of the 3rd platoon. The head of the 2nd platoon took my place with his men. The remainder of my men got on the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th helicopters, and they lifted off. 10 minutes later, that helicopter landed and hit a booby trap, killing Lieutenant John Gross. And I'm very, very lucky to be alive because my general had picked me to be his aide.
Well, a funny one would be a beginning one. When I the first battle I went to with my unit was funny for me, but another company had been in contact with the enemy in a forested area and had got a couple of guys killed or something. And so they called our company that morning to come help them out. And so we all jumped on the tracks and went out to this first battle. And it was at breakfast time. I put some hard-boiled eggs in my pocket, and as if I was going to eat them later, and along with grenades. The two do not mix. But when we got to the battle site, our unit was so new. Most of the guys didn't know what to do, basically, short of what they'd been taught. And we actually encountered the enemy. We went in there, and one of our guys was very quick, apparently, that morning, and he jumped away from the enemy just before they shot at him. But from that point on, they just ripped at us. They shot a lot of ammunition at us, but it went over our heads because we were laying there as close to the ground as we could get, looking at each other, everyone thinking, what do we do now? Who's giving orders here? Nobody was giving orders, and we didn't fire a shot until finally one of the old timers came running up from behind, not as far as us, but we could hear him yelling at us, "You damn fools, start shooting!" And so we took that as an order and started shooting back, and the enemy stopped. They figured, okay, this is a bunch of guys out there, we're not going to fight with them. And so, but they finally had us retreat from there for some reason. I don't know why. They don't tell you very much in battle. They just say do this and do that. And so we came out of there kind of whooped up because, we've been in our first fight. We didn't have a single wound or injury of any kind. But we finally figured out that sometimes you don't wait for the order to fire back.
A few minutes later, he looked at me and pointed, and he said, "How many of my people did you kill when you were in Vietnam?" And I was shocked that someone would ask me that kind of a question. So I lied and said, "Oh, I was in administration, none."
I remember when my daughter was in the 3rd grade, and they had a field trip to the Sunnyvale Museum, which I didn't even know they had. And I volunteered to be a chaperone. And I'm walking in the front of there's maybe 30, 40 kids, Miss Maddox, the teacher, was in the back, and I was in the front. And I'm walking, my daughter, and Mickey Lai was the fellow I told you about teaching over at Mountain View. He was in the 3rd grade. And he looked up at me and he says, "Mr. Morash?" I said, "Yes." "You were in Vietnam, weren't you?" I said, "Yes, I was." He says, "How many people did you kill?" Totally unexpected. Totally. And I looked down at him and I said, "I didn't kill anybody." And that's the honest God truth. But I couldn't tell this kid, this little boy, anything past that. I said, "I worked in communications there. I didn't do any of that." And I'll never forget that, because here's a kid in the 3rd grade, and his parents came over from Vietnam. He was born here. The last paragraph is, that's pretty much exactly what Mickey did to me when we walked. I can say here right now that whatever I've passed along is truth as I see it. And Now, there's certain embellishments anybody can make in any story. I just don't believe in taking the truth and skew it so far adrift that there's no reality to it. I go to these Vietnam Veterans of America meetings once a month, full of GI veterans, mostly Army, but from all walks of the military. And I sit there and I listen to a lot of the stories some of these fellas talk about. And then my mind is going, well, that's a bunch of bullshit. But you don't say that, you just listen to it. Because probably in that vein of story, there's some truth to it.
So to you, what's more important, the facts or the feeling of it being real?
I think facts are. This is the fact. How I feel about it after. I can't change that. But if it was the way I felt and the facts become meaningless, then I discount my feelings and I deal with the facts, and that's the way it was. I can't change it.
There's a book by a psychologist named Vanderbilt called "The Body Keeps the Score," and how people process trauma. They create their own narrative over time, or they box it away completely. I think I had a conversation maybe 5 years ago with a person who was in my platoon, and we talked about one particular firefight we were in. A firefight is a engagement where you're shooting at the other side and they're shooting back. But the two of us had very different memories of this one highly charged 20 minutes max. And I don't think it was a made up truth. It was just you process different things. You may not be looking over at the left at what's happening over there.
So you're saying even happening truths can't inherently be story truths, because in the firefight you can't remember exactly what happened, and it's just your emotions that come out as maybe he was shooting, I was shooting, whatever happened.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I don't understand him, because when you go through horror, you don't forget things. I remember almost every single tough thing we went through. There's not a lot I don't remember, and I don't have a brilliant brain. So
novelists will fictionalize anything because they're working on a novel and the effect of the novel. That's okay. I can live with that. But if they're trying to relate history in some way or fashion, I think they ought to be truthful. I know, like with myself, I took a lot of pictures over there, and I find my recollection of not so much details, but the chronology of events and what happened and so forth is far greater than guys that don't have any pictures to look at. And sometimes they are so confused, they don't know fact from fiction. And I can understand how they can merge, battle insights together and think that this happened to that guy and that happened to this guy and get very confused about the whole thing. It's just a natural, the brain does that kind of stuff. So I don't say that every detail has to be exactly so and accurate, because I know it won't be.
And when you tell the story to other people, do you feel like they understand your emotions or your perspective, or is it hard because they're non-combatants?
I'd have to say that most people are not very interested in war stories. Very few times do I actually talk to people about war stories, other than other vets. From time to time I talk with other vets about it, but that's about it.
So there's no doubt in my mind that people sometimes craft their own narratives, either intentionally or unintentionally, as a psychological protective mechanism. It's, we all go through life constructing our own narratives. I was a trial lawyer for a while, and I at one point had to convince a jury that a very nice person was lying. And I told them that people people don't tell the truth, they're not necessarily trying to deceive you. They may just remember things differently. They may be influenced by what they heard somebody else say. You know, it's the old thing. You know the difference between a fairy tale and a war story? A fairy tale begins once upon a time. A war story begins, this is no shit. And when soldiers get together, and I've seen this with Afghanistan veterans as well, you know, there are a lot of stories that just never get told. But there's something I think common to all wars, that the veterans rarely talk about their experience with non-veterans because they're just not going to understand. And with other veterans, they can talk in code, they can make crude jokes, they can summarize things in a way that make it a little easier to deal with.
In my writing, I haven't created anything for or illustrative reasons. So everything that I have written is the truth, and it's not embellished. And so the goal of writing about warfare is to tell the truth, to educate people who might in the future become political leaders about that the honorable thing is to prevent wars and to stop wars and to negotiate to end the wars.
Everybody have their own truth. If you ask somebody in the city, someone is very wealthy and powerful in the government, they will tell you their story. I am a farmer. I always stand for the farmer side. I am villagers. They have no voice. I want to give them some voices.
You know, there was no welcome home for us when we got home, except from our family and a few friends. There was no parades. There was no, welcome home parties or anything like that. We just kind of filtered back into society, and not like after World War II when everybody came home to rousing parades and parties and, all of these things that were done for these warriors, and it was well deserved. Not that I really expected anything, because I had a 2-year obligation, and I served my time, and I was ready to get back into civilian society and have a civilian job, whatever that may be. So I never really thought about it too much at that time. I probably think about it more as I've aged and gotten older, and I think there's more of a focus by the American public now to recognize what Vietnam veterans went through and never got recognized for now, and more so than ever before. And that's mainly because World War II veterans are up in their 90s and hundreds if they're still alive. Korean War veterans are not far behind them. So we're kind of the main focus right now, because we're in our late 70s, 80s, and 90s, some of us. Most of us are dead. Most of the Vietnam veterans that served actually in the country in the war are dead. Most of my people that I served with are dead. I'm one of the survivors. How much longer I have on Earth, I have no idea. But I take a day at a time, and I'm thankful for every day I have. I wear this Vietnam veterans hat for the guys that didn't make it home. And, most people don't say anything. Some people say, welcome home, or thank you for your service. It's kind of obligatory to some people, say, thank you for your service. I always say thank you back. And occasionally, if I'm feeling kind of cocky, I'll say, you were worth it. Just to give them a different answer. Because
somehow, back in the 60s, a lot of people had missed the high school civics lesson about You know, the Congress appropriates the money, the president sends people to war, and nobody in the military decides we're going to go to war. And they certainly don't decide I'm going to go to Vietnam. They're following the orders of their civilian authority. And a lot of people came home, and the lack of respect was hard on them. I think there were a lot of, these were young people whose personalities and life experience weren't all that formed when they went into the military. They come out, they're dropped into civilian society. There was no thank you for your service. There were no parades. And many young people suffered for it. Alcohol.
My parents, my siblings, my friends, they all recognized what I went through, and they kind of, they kind of congratulated me when I got. To me, that was enough. I didn't need to have a parade or.
People don't really need parades. It's a metaphor. And I think for most of the people who served in Vietnam, it was very painful to come back to an environment where the people who disagreed with American foreign policy didn't respect the soldiers. It was not uncommon for a 19, 20-year-old who's come home from a year in Vietnam. He's in uniform in public, somebody might spit at him, and we'd say, and call him a baby killer.
I got spit on when I was going through the courses and coming back from San Francisco because we were called baby killers.
One time, one of my friends, he spit on him.
And that's how I started my law enforcement career with Mountain View. Now, as soon as I got on the police department and I went through the academy, the first assignments I had was going to anti-Vietnam War riots at Berkeley, at Stanford, at San Jose State. So now I'm really, I just got back from Vietnam less than a year, and now I'm going to all these anti-war riots,
I do not regret, and I'd probably do it again.
Oh, I did my duty, which was prescribed by the government.
No, because it changed me for the better.
No, not at all. I'd do it again.
Well, yeah, it's what a waste of my time, I almost got killed there, for what purpose? No good purpose, really. Well, I still run into the misconception that we could have won that war. There's no way. It was lost from the inception because there was no real reason to go to that part of the world and for the United States to fight for Vietnamese freedom. Well, the Vietnamese took care of that.
In hindsight, all these years later, was it the right war? Probably not. I hated 55,000 GIs getting killed over there. And of course, you'll hear a lot. For what?
At a meeting with Henry Kissinger in Paris, the vice minister of North Vietnam, who was running the place, Ho Chi Minh was quite old at that point, at one point said to Henry Kissinger, we can sacrifice 10, 20, 30, 40,000 men a year forever. Can you? And we were losing at that point 10, 11,000 a year. And the American public was not at all happy. I would like to have an ankle that worked and a knee that was operative, and I'd like to have avoided a year in the hospital. Pretty much all the dads of our generation served in World War II. And military service was honorable. It was something men did, and something that most people were proud of.
To make a sacrifice for your country is the ultimate sacrifice, and there's not everybody that would do something like that.
I came out of the experience with skill sets that had come in handy at various times since then.
I'll say at this point, I would never have gotten to where I'm at in my career without the United States Army. I got an education there, did the best I could, and I am a 100% supporter of the military, particularly the Army.
But I gained self-confidence and self-respect. I know I could lead people where beforehand I was just a run-of-the-mill people and be successful at it. I know that you think of others before you think about yourself. I learned a lot of things from Vietnam.
Well, I got blown up and came home on a stretcher, so nobody expects that to happen.
And lasting effects, I lost my hearing, so you hear hearing aids in me.
I am 100% disabled. And the reason for that is I have tinnitus, which is loss of hearing due to being in combat.
Agent Orange is out there.
I also have neuropathy in my legs, which is attributed to exposure to Agent Orange when I was in Vietnam. And I also suffered from sleep deprivation. Ever since I got back from Vietnam, I've never been able to sleep through the night. I always wake up 4 or 5 times. I never sleep more than an hour or 2 at a time. And the reason for that is when I was in Vietnam, we were on ambush patrols most of the time, or on guard duty and things like that. So we never slept through the night. We were on guard duty for a couple hours, off for a couple, back on. So I never got a complete night of sleep the whole time I was there, and it just kind of continued on.
Out in the jungle, you may get 2 hours of sleep at night. First thing I needed to do when I came home was sleep.
Well, I think it made me appreciate life more. I think it matured me beyond my years. Being in the military taught me discipline, it taught me camaraderie, it taught teamwork, all of the things that it takes to survive and be effective. Those are qualities I carry into my life right now as a father, as a husband, as a citizen of the community.
I don't like people walking behind me. If I can hear somebody behind me, I'll stand and put my back to the wall. When I go in a restaurant, I always want to sit with my back to the wall. And that is from Vietnam.
I was going through what amounts to PTSD without knowing it was PTSD, and almost shot myself with a pistol that I had captured over there. The one you saw pictured, and yeah, I just about shot myself one night just because I was shaken up so much at the ordeal you had to go through day in, day out, going back to school and dealing with war traumas, what it amounts to.
Really still with me. Even though I married to American, I came to American, I live here, I am have a good life, everything, but the war is still in me. It's not really healed because I'm not the only person it happened. It happened to the whole country.
A classmate of mine, last name John White, everything about John was better than me. He graduated from Yale. I graduated from San Jose State. He was an honor grad at Yale. I had maybe a 2.2 grade point average out of San Jose State. So everything about him was better than me, and that creates a fairly common psychological problem called survivor's guilt. And the survivor's guilt is, why was I allowed or came back alive, and someone who everything about him was better than me died. And so that's what they call survivor's guilt. And I deal with that.
As I got older and I aged, and I I still think that we were doing the right thing trying to save South Vietnam from communism, because the people in Vietnam right now are living under communism. The country is united, but they're living under a communist regime, which is very totalitarian. You don't have the freedoms that we enjoy here in the United States, which I feel sorry for.
North Korea became communist, and they were worried about Laos and Cambodia becoming communist. North Vietnam had become communist, and they were worried about Thailand becoming communist. So we heard the words domino effect.
And we don't know who the communist. We only know that if they just keep talking about the communist, we don't even know what is communist. But we know that the Viet Cong, we know the people they call Viet Cong. We don't call them Viet Cong. We call them the Liberation Troop, and they come at night. And but we know them. They are villagers. We grow up with them. We call them uncles, brother, cousin. So we know them. So we trusted them. But the South Vietnamese and American come to the village. We don't know them. We just a stupid farmer. We do what had to be told to do. No argue, no question to ask, just obey. And so the South Vietnamese said they fight it for Vietnamese, for us, so we can have peace and freedom. But then the Viet Cong came at night. They asked us to do the same thing, help them to fight for the Vietnamese. And so we can have peace and freedom. And end up, nobody asked us. That is, we want it that way. How would we like to live in peace and without war? Nobody listen or to our cry out for help. We only can obey. We bury the dead, take care of the wound, being raped, being tortured, being killed.
I'll tell you who I really felt sorry for was the villagers, the people that were in this war, that, they had no place to go. They couldn't flee anywhere to get away from it. And it wasn't like previous wars where there were battle lines, there were front lines and rear lines. I mean, the war was all around you because the VC operated in their jungles and rice paddies and swamps. And our main mission at that time was to go out, search, and destroy.
One early morning, they come and they tell the interpreter, tell the villager that you have to move. We're gonna level your village. And first question they asked, where will we move to? That I don't care, you move. So first thing they did that gate the water flow out the pond. Then the second they let on the pig gone. Then they try to get some duck and chicken and little rice and carry and run away with the children. And within few hours, all the big tree leveled down, the pond filled up, the graveyard destroyed, the big mansion gone. I mean, it's just within one day, the hamlet, the beautiful hamlet or village, is completely wiped out. And they all come to our house and they all look it over and we only can cry. We can't even cry because if we cry, they want to know why we cry. And it's just like pressing down and we carrying on from day to day and we just don't know what to do. We are powerless, we are voiceless, we are faceless, and we have no name, only call out a stupid farmer. And that is kind of thing that I think the treat to villager is very unfair in any war, because anyone that come to village with a gun, they have the power. Anyone come to village with the power uniform, they are the boss and tell us what to do. And if we don't do, they shot us right at the spot. Many people, like 3 to 5 million Vietnamese killed. We have to learn how to live with one another. We have to understand that if we own in one family of mankind, and we have to help and share our knowledge, our wisdom, our compassion, our love.
I tell numerous kids when they want to, if they'll listen, if you don't know what you want to do in life and you want to go on the street corner and flip nickels, join a branch of the service, Navy, Marine, I don't care. Prefer Army, but that's your option. Get an education. Be the best you can be.
If you go into the military, do the best you can, but be on your guard because other people have some crazy notions about what you're supposed to do and why you're supposed to do it.
So stay true to yourself.
Danger to yourself and immoral at times. So you got to watch what other people send you to do because sometimes it's just not right.
I have a lot of faith and confidence in the younger generation. I think they're better educated than we were.
What I would say to people is be the best you can be. Strive for excellence. Whatever you're going to do it well. Become the person that other people look to for help, for guidance, for assistance. And if you can do those things, everything will work out pretty well.
Don't fall in love. Don't get married. Don't thinking about after you finish college and go make a lot of money and be happy. No. Get yourself a backpack, save enough money, and travel. Travel around the world. Don't join the military unless you know what it's for. If the war comes to the U.S., you stand up and fight for this country because you live here and you have to protect it. But don't volunteer to go fight somebody else, karma. That is their karma. If you want to get married and have family, make sure you be 30 or after. Don't get too young and hook up. Be smart, be wise, and be free. Don't let anyone tell you anything different than you can tell yourself. You're smarter than anyone else. And so you don't let anyone tell you what to do or how to live your life. You have your own mind to do so. For younger people, study hard, be smart, be compassionate, love everybody, forgive anything, and move on as you can. Don't let anything hold you back. It's key. Yes, I just want to say thank you for Keith and also all the teachers, the professor who used my books. My book is not for me so that I can become a writer or whatever because I'm just a third grade educated girl. What did I know? But one thing I want to make sure that educate yourself and see you the books help to educate the young. And that is the future depend on that. And I'm so glad and thank you that she used my book in her class.
There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and a carrying signs. Mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Paranoia strikes deep. into your life, it will creep. It starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, the man come and take you away. We better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop.